Welcome to Scream Kings. We're going to talk about some scary movies.
Just a little break from your regularly scheduled programming discussions. We love talking about horror, and we did not want horror to dominate every single movie conversation from now on. So we had a little opportunity to take a break, quick little aside, a quick little intermission.
I know why I love horror movies. And I've loved horror movies for a very long time. I think the first ones I remember watching were the Friday the 13th movies. I was 10, 11 years old watching them going, I shouldn't really be watching these.
Right.
I was watching them with my brother's friends, or we would do sleepovers and watch them. And we thought two things were really cool about them. One, it was kind of cool to see the inventive ways that they were unaliving all these campers. Is that the phrase? And two, I was a teenager. It was cool to see the naked bodies, right?
Yes, yeah.
So, but I moved from Friday the 13th to Nightmare on Elm Street. Mm-hmm. That was eye-opening for me. That went from, just crazy, stupid, real, funny slasher things to, wow. You can really tell stories and
totally out there,
get in depth and go crazy with this. But what's your origin story for horror movies?
So my parents were fairly conservative when it came to movies. So I was not raised with your classics. It took a little while. I do remember, I think one of the earliest movies that we circumnavigated the parental approval was probably Child's Play. And I remember I was fairly young when Child's Play came out, and I was fairly terrified. There were a couple moments where I was like, this is really scary, right? I will also throw a nod and say, I want to say 10th grade, 11th grade, buddy's sleepover slumber party, and we watched Faces of Death, the actual original Faces of Death. And that, to me, was kind of like, I love the communal, the forbidden, oh my God, what I love about horror the most is it's contrary to what you should be looking at. Be it naked ladies, be it people dying, be it serial killers' POVs. It's contrary. It is different than here's a character you're supposed to like and doing what they're supposed to be doing, wearing the clothes that they're supposed to be wearing, and not being dead. So I love that contrary aspect of it. So let's fast forward a little bit. I was one of the first folks to see Blair Witch Project. I sought out a pre-screening. It was in the Washington, D.C. area. It was 2 weeks before the wide release. And that movie really sunk. That was one of the first movies where I was obsessed and amazed by the artistic and technical execution of the whole thing. But also I was horrified. I came out of that theater going, oh my God, I grew up camping in those woods. I'm from Maryland. The movie was shot 15 minutes from my house. I'd done about 10 years of camping in the general area. The brand of tent they used, it's a Eureka Timberline, if I remember correctly, was the exact same brand of tent that we used. So I know what it looks like to lay down and see those seams shake, or when you're like, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? Am I going to make it through the night? As a young child to now. So that's what kind of got me. I like these more than just, I pick a movie. I loved sci-fi and comedy, but I think Blair Witch really was the one that kind of said there is a whole world to explore. There's feelings with both admiration of technical execution and then that gut feeling that you get.
I always liked that at that age when I first started discovering horror films, we had a dollar theater near us. Remember those?
Yes.
It was like the second, third run movies.
Right. Before VHS. Yeah.
And so they were showing some new horror movies. And I was like, well, my friends and I, we wanted to go see it, but it was R-rated, no one under 16. And we were 13.
Right.
And so we were like, maybe if we go in and we're going to say we're going to go to this movie, but then go into the other. But also not realizing that the people that were running the box office were high school kids.
Right.
They didn't care.
Right.
Whatever you want this ticket, go. We don't care. So I went from that, and then Night of the Living Dead. Mm-hmm. Saw that Halloween on MTV.
All right.
The beginning of the end of MTV playing music. I don't know.
Right.
It was awesome.
Uh-huh.
And that movie let me know that you could tell more than just slashery stuff.
Right.
It was later that I learned, okay, Friday the 13th, there was like a moral to the story. So that's when I started learning, okay, you can have horror,
do this,
but
you get
there's
slashed, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
So the people Scream kind of really laid all that out, that,
Right.
if you're doing the, premarital sex and teenage
drinking
sex
and
and
drugs,
drinking and drugs,
yeah.
you're done for. It's the innocent people that get out alive.
Right.
Although I will say the gorier the movies got that I liked watching, the more that I started rooting for the bad guy.
Right.
Because it's like, all right, what cool creative ways are they going to get these people, right?
Right.
I've taken a shift from, I like watching all different kinds of horror movies.
Okay.
I like the gory. I like the psychological.
Right.
I like a little of everything. The religious horror movies don't really do anything for me.
Right.
It doesn't capture me, right?
Sure.
Like, I don't have that. Now, like Halloween and Friday the 13th have that almost supernatural feel. Like, how do they keep coming back alive? Right. It's not that. It's the exorcism and, oh my God, the devil is doing this.
Like the real devil.
The possessed stuff. Things like that.
Right.
Just doesn't do it for me. It doesn't.
Right. Suspension of disbelief type of thing, or just there's no
Yeah,
connection?
it's like there's no connection, right?
Right.
But then I started to really enjoy the bad horror movies.
Mm-hmm.
Like the ones that are not just so bad that they're good,
Right.
but the ones that are so bad that they're just bad.
Right.
So now I don't go and see like every horror movie that comes out.
Right.
I think a lot of them have gotten a little too formulaic. Like you watch the trailer and you're like, oh, I know how this is going to end. And there's going to be 3 or 4 more in the series, because horror movies are great for having multiple movies and making money.
Right.
And so now I've kind of verged to the incredibly amateur horror movies or the almost art house horror films.
Your A24s, your
The
Midsommar
A24s,
and
things like that.
Witch.
Or the 60s and 70s Italian.
the Gialli.
horror.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about you?
So one of the things about I too eschew contemporary horror for the most part, mainly because we're not the audience anymore.
Right.
Back in the 80s, horror movies were made for us, and we got older, and the industry does make the occasional movie for us. Like, I don't think The Witch is for 15-year-olds, right? It's for a mature audience with a mature outlook. But your average fun horror movie, to be experienced with a group in a theater, that's not for us anymore. So they're competing with phones. They know that you're not going to invest. I don't want to turn this into a big, huge thing about the state of Hollywood and how it treats their audiences, but they know that you're not going to sit there and invest with a character to be psychologically horrified after an hour of buildup. You got to get them now, get them not looking at their phones, and then get them out the door saying, hey, I like that. I want to see it again, or bring other people. So I want to see the most recent scary movie. I really thought, wow, that was really cool. I loved Autopsy of Jane Doe. I know that wasn't brand new. It's, say, 10 years, right? We might have to fact check that one. But I was like, wow, I'm a huge fan of Brian Cox, just absolutely Brian Cox. And so if he's in it, I want to watch it. There's a naked lady there, but there's dread. There is, and here's my current barometer if a scary movie was actually scary, is, you've watched the movie, you're kind of done, lights are on, but I go out to take out the trash. And it's like I got to get to here and back as quick as possible, right? Because there's that little bit of your hair is still up,
Right.
Right. I got to be careful. I got to watch my corners. So, but yeah, I'm with you. I love bad horror movies. I want to have fun. I think 99% of the time, if I'm putting on a horror movie at this point, I have very little expectation that I'm going to get that freaked out. I'm like, okay, well, let's have some fun. Wow me with your inventiveness and creativity.
Right.
And if you had fun, I'll probably have fun.
Yeah.
Like, that's why I'm going to talk about my favorite horror movie is Basket Case. I've got the one of my prized possessions is my VHS copy of Basket Case. It on all surfaces, it was not a success when it initially came out. The acting did not build any careers. The special effects, but it was what it was, and that's what I love about it. You can tell the writer director. He just wanted to make a horror movie. He had no intention anybody would see it, right? And so that love of, okay, well, we got to do this, and we got to do that, and we got to do these special effects, and just we'll shoot as long as we have money, and then we'll pause and save up and do it again. But that created some faults, so I need to now shoot one of these scenes to make up for the fault in the scene we already shot. And so because there's a love there, like he didn't know how to do stop motion puppetry at all. He didn't know how to do puppets at all. He learned how to do stop motion, and he learned how to do silicone rubber molding to create Belial, and it's so endearing. So I love a movie that if they're having fun, I can have fun. I don't like laziness, and there are plenty of terrible horror movies where they got lazy. And so the bad acting, the bad special effects, the bad writing is not enjoyable because it's lazy.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think one of the reasons I like the cheaper, less funded amateur movies is because they are more willing to take a risk to try something just really outlandish to see if it works. Right. Will this work? How will it look? It might look like crap, but who cares? We're having fun doing it, right? I think a lot of the laziness for me is when they're like, well, we're just going to have the lights low and just throw a bunch of jump scares on you.
Right.
Like horror movies have never really scared me. It's, have you reached a kind of creepiness level to me where I'm going, oh, that's gross and creepy. I like it.
Right.
So like I'm a fan of the Saw movies.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm also a fan of Human Centipede.
Right.
I think it's great because it really hits that creepy factor. I'm a big fan of the second movie too. Because the second movie, you haven't seen it. I don't think you've seen the first one.
I have not seen the first or the second or the third.
So the second one gets very meta. It's from the perspective of, it's all black and white.
Okay.
It's a fan of the first one.
Right.
Trying to recreate it. Right.
Right.
Now this fan is not all, I think, mentally there.
Okay.
And he's a parking garage attendant.
Wait, not playing with a full centipede?
Not playing with the full centipede. He doesn't have a good head on his
butt.
So he's a parking garage attendant.
Right.
And so he just is like, well, this is how they did it in the movie.
Right.
And so he's using duct tape and things like that. And it just gets really gross and really bad. And you're like, all right, and that's why it's, black and white, because kind of like Tarantino with Kill Bill,
right.
Like, to keep it under a certain rating, if he did color,
right,
you're looking at NC-17X or just not going to be shown anywhere at all. Right.
Right.
So the fact that they're going to take chances and do something just new and different and not just have it quiet and dark and creepy and then boom.
Right.
Right. That's
Nun.
lazy.
Right.
That's lazy to me.
It is lazy. And it's disappointing when it's lazy, but it's so invigorating when it's exciting and fresh and new.
Hereditary did a lot of jump scares.
They did.
But it worked because the way they built up to it. Right. Like you saw it happening before it happened. Right. There's the, crawling on the ceiling behind her. You see that happening. So that jump scare is coming.
Right.
So when it hits, it's a payoff. Right.
And jump scares are fine. It's when that is what's carrying your movie because you couldn't come up with atmosphere or tension.
Yeah.
That's where, just like shaky cam in a fight. Bourne Ultimatum created the shaky cam, and they did it amazing with the two choreographed trained fighters. And they said, what if the camera guy got in the way, so he has to back up a little bit. Everybody else was like, oh, look, if I shake the camera so much you don't know what's going on, I don't need to pay for choreographed fighters. And so there's a time and a place, but if it's laziness or a shortcut, you've watered it down.
Yeah.
You made it terrible. Before we get too far, I also want to shout out one of my favorite endearing poor movies is Bad Taste by Peter Jackson. This movie, I absolutely recommend it 100%. Peter Jackson just wanted to make a movie with his buddies. He had all the planning done. He did all the special effects himself. He is so innovative and was able to pull off things that on a shoestring budget, but there's also a sense of humor, so you can tell they're having fun. And at the end of the movie, I was like, all right, slow clap. I'm ready for Lord of the Rings.
I enjoyed it more than Lord of the Rings.
I'm gonna second that. I'm not a huge Lord of the Rings fan.
I love how like the piece of the brain comes out and he's like, and then he puts it in. He's like, oh, okay, I'm good.
And he
ties the bandana and he's
just
good
to make sure, right.
and he's fine. He can move around, and then it falls out again, and it's like nothing. And then he puts it in, and it's got like dirt and
yes, it's
awesome. It's awesome.
And there's a level of I love this, right?
Yeah.
There's not a single shortcut was taken. It was a stretch, and so again, one of those endearing bad movies I absolutely love.
I think so. You've heard me talk about this one a lot. Is Babadook?
Yeah, I have not watched Babadook.
I absolutely love Babadook because it's one of those films that it's a very tiny cast,
right?
And it's not. It's a whole lot more than just a horror movie, right? And there's no one to root for.
Right.
There's just this dread throughout the entire film, and you don't know where it's going.
Right.
There's not an origin to anything. They don't try to explain anything away. It just, boom, here it hits. It's happening. Deal with it.
Right.
And that's kind of how it continues on, even through the credits.
The filmmaker was able to kind of play. I felt like there was a lack of studio interference, right? It does not follow a traditional story arc, or this is the time when you introduce the screaming teenagers, and this is the part where you introduce the bad guy, and this is the part. It really felt like, hey, look, I know how I want to lead people on this journey. And it was, I'm not going to say masterstroke, but it was
I think
well
the film,
informed.
I think it's a masterstroke in the film, and I don't want to say too much more about it as to what the overall movie is saying.
Right.
Because it just kind of it would spoil it, I think.
Right.
For people who haven't seen it, so I'm trying to stay back. But it's those, like the small cast stuff I really like. There's a great one called Honeymoon.
Okay.
Where it's got what's her face from Game of Thrones.
Okay.
I've talked about this one. There's
Emilia Clarke?
No, she played Rose Leslie. She was the one that said, "You know nothing, Jon Snow."
Oh, yeah, Jon's wife from the cave.
Yeah,
the little Irish
exactly.
girl, yeah.
There's like 3 people in the movie.
Okay.
And it's just, again, throughout the entire film, you've got this sense of dread, like just from beginning to end.
Right.
And you just don't know, as an audience, you don't know where to go with it. So it really envelops you, and you're experiencing the film and not just watching it going, don't run up the stairs. That's stupid. You're going to break your heel doing this, and then you're not going to be able to run. Or why are you going that way when you should be going that way? I like the inventiveness of things like that.
And I think, so to pair with that one, also under the A24 umbrella, I'm huge fan of The Witch. I think that movie, came around at the right time, especially for me, where I was like, okay, I kind of written off new horror, I think, at that point. I kind of said, it's going to be more than none. And sure, some good stuff comes around now and then. But when I saw The Witch, I was like, I was not only excited about more movies from Eggers, I was also excited about what filmmakers are going to get inspired to do. When you pulled off The Witch, I thought that really kind of punched through a little bit as far as we're eschewing anything traditional. We are going down this path, the natural lighting, right? Like a simple thing like that, right? Like I decided this is going to be at night, so I just filmed it at night. As the great Neil Breen would say, Eggers decided, Robert Eggers said, I want this to really kind of feel real. And so we're not going to there's no electric light in the filming at all. Now they cheated a little bit. They made some of their windows bigger than what architecture provided back then. They used triple wick candles that if you were poor, you couldn't always afford. But all the lighting is 100% natural. And so it just that one little idea, that little bit of discipline really kind of made it feel more real. And so you got something fantasy, something that is supernatural, but I thought brought it into something kind of real.
Right.
And it was that mushing together that kind of grabbed me. But then I loved the story. I loved the journey. And then the destination was like, wow, you totally blew my mind. So, and I love A24 knows what they're doing. They curate what films they decide to produce or to distribute. So, which really brought me up to, it shook off the cobwebs.
Well, I mean, up to that point, there was a lot of like 84 Paranormal Activities and
right.
Insidious and all of those where it was
and
becoming
4 more remakes
very,
of Exorcist. Yeah.
very cookie cutter. And every now and then something would sneak through. But yeah, for the longest time, it was the only ones I would ever really get excited about were the Saw movies.
Right.
Like, I did Hostel. I saw the first one. It's interesting.
It's here.
It's here. I like Eli Roth, but it didn't get me.
Right.
Right. It was just, to me, that one seemed like we've got all these cool ideas of ways of torture. We're just going to, they were vignettes. It wasn't a movie. It was just a bunch of vignettes. And things sometimes just didn't make sense. And it's horror movies. They never make sense.
Right. But
this one just seemed a little too far. So I just was like, okay, Hostel's done. Never really got into the Paranormal Activity stuff. And
right.
So it's like, that's, I think, what drove me more into the amateur and independent elements, and more of the found footage things. Because I think it's that non-polished grittiness that sold me on a lot of this. And I think you get that with The Witch and some of these others, because it's not pristine. It's like, to make a leap to another topic we always talk about, Star Wars, the original trilogy wasn't shiny polished.
No.
The prequels come out and everything is like pristine, shiny, polished, digital.
Right.
And there's a whole different feel to it.
And there's a subconscious disconnect.
Yes.
Not just the physical disconnect.
Right.
Of this actor does not know what he's looking at. Mm-hmm. But there was also that, like, I'm watching a cutscenes from a video game CD-ROM. That's how it felt to me.
Exactly. And so a lot of these quickly mass-produced Hollywood horror ones that only come out, at Halloween because they know that's when they're going to hit the audience, just doesn't really hit it for me.
Yeah, I agree. So I have a question for you.
All right.
If you're meeting somebody for the first time and you realize they like horror, the question is, what's the scariest movie? What's your scariest movie?
Scariest in what way?
So like if you had to say, so we talked about enjoying, and we've gone into depth, right? Talking about enjoying the art house stuff and the fun, right? But horror does have an element of scary. So to just get some of your benchmarks, what would you say is the movie that scares you or rocks you or creeps you out?
I think it'd be the two that I already talked about.
Okay.
Yeah, Honeymoon.
Yeah.
And Babadook.
Okay.
More because of the mental approach of things, like how it leaves you feeling. The thing that's driven me in my daily life is always trying to figure out how do people maneuver through reality and life, right?
When everybody's so dumb.
When you're so dumb.
How are you still here?
So like everybody's dealing with is battling their own demons, and everybody's reality is different, even though it's all the same reality, right? So I know how I kind of make it through the day, but I don't know how other people make it through the day. And that's always been curious for me, right? And so that's why I've studied psychology and things like that.
Right.
And so it's that worry of the loss of yourself within yourself.
Right.
And dealing with mental struggles.
Right.
And so those films kind of scare me the most because it's dealing with a lot of that. And so you could see in those films that being that could happen to anybody. Right. Like the slasher movies, no, it's not going to happen to anybody. There are no Jasons, there are no Freddys, because it's
child's play is not. I mean,
exactly.
They're fun, but
these things could be.
And so I want to jump on that,
especially Honeymoon over Babadook.
Right.
But yeah.
So I am going to bring back the future episode timer, just for fun. I want to do a whole little side episode about cannibal movies. And to your exact point, I do not ever go camping and think, oh, there might be a Texas Chainsaw Massacre or Jason out here. Even with Blair Witch, and I told you about that connection.
Right.
It does not turn me away. I don't believe that this is an evil that I'm going to, a fate that could befall me. However, cannibals or savage tribes that are unconnected to the real world, you could essentially come across them in your travels. And
I mean, you see videos of like drones flying and them throwing spears to knock them down because
there are some, they call them uncommunicated or unconnected tribes. Yeah. So it's not very likely that I'm going to the Amazon, but if I did,
well, it's like, what is it? Your chances of dying by a cow are not zero, or being killed by a cow are not zero.
Right.
They're low, but they're not zero. So
but my chances of being killed by Jason are zero.
Yes.
So I find a little bit of a twinge in the cannibal movies because I'm like, this isn't so far-fetched. I mean, it's far-fetched, but it's not outside the realm of possibility. So I want to do a whole episode just talking about cannibal movies. I've got a ton to say about cannibal movies. I want to rank cannibal movies. Watch as many cannibal movies as you can right now, so you're ready. But I will do a ranking and kind of tell you which ones you can save from, and we'll share and contrast. So if someone asks me what's my scariest movie, I always come back to Jacob's Ladder. And I hate that I have to say the original, 1992 with Macaulay Culkin. It's because there was a new one that sucks. But
is it based on the same thing?
Really? It's like a reboot. Yeah, it's awful.
I remember hearing about.
It's like Total Recall. But nobody that
I know saw it.
I just like to.
I did see the Total Recall remake.
Yeah,
it's horrible.
I hated the RoboCop remake. I thought it was so far. Anyway.
Another topic.
Jacob's Ladder. I saw that in college. And maybe due to some of the recreational experiences I was having, it really hit home. And like you said, it's all about kind of being inside yourself and your self-autonomy. Mm-hmm. And so not only were the visuals on point, like the derelict hospital scene with like the foot getting stuck under the wheel and the deformed patients, not only that was like nailed it, but on top of that, there's a whole psychological issue of, am I losing my mind? What is real? What is not real? Why is this going on? And then there's the ending. And it's like, bam! Oh my God, that was crazier and more horrifying or more shocking than I had anticipated.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't trying to figure it out. Sure, every movie's a puzzle you can try to figure it out. I'm sure you could figure it out. Don't try. Just watch it. The director was Adrian Lin, who did Fatal Attraction. He did not want to do this project. He was kind of begged to do it. And he said, okay, fine, but if I'm going to do it, they had a lot of special effects planned, a ton. And he brought it way down. He said it's much scarier if you don't see what you thought you see.
Don't show the shark.
Right. And so, like, there's a lady on the subway with a tail. There's the lady at the medical office with the horns. And it was brief and gone, right? The horse head and the refrigerator, the Vibra head. He had a huge budget and said, no. We are not going to be having... They had a part where because I've read the screenplay, the ceiling lifts off and a winged demon comes down. And they had the money for it.
Yeah.
Because it had been approved.
I think that would ruin it.
And it would have. Yeah. And he was like, this is the director saying, I know exactly what we need to do to frighten the bejesus out of people. And it worked. Not only is it the scariest movie I've seen, and that's got my Hall of Fame, it's one of my favorite New York movies. Like, every time we go to New York and you start walking up the stairs from the subway, I'm like, I hope it's not locked, right? Like, I hope there's not a cage across, because that's something that, it could happen. It could happen. You could be locked in a subway. So that, to me, nailed it. But if I want to talk about scary movies where you got me, you had your fingers on the parts of my brain and you got it. You nailed it. That would be Jacob's Ladder for me.
Yeah. I think. Yeah, I don't disagree with anything you say there. Right. I think Serpent and the Rainbow gets close to that.
Right.
I think most of the film is there, and then the stuff at the end, the final showdown type of thing, kind of ruins it.
Right.
But I think everything up to that is just like spot on.
Right.
That's one of my favorite, I guess, New Orleans-y. Well,
Right.
it's not really New Orleans, but
Right.
voodoo-y type of things where a lot of it could happen because it all deals with chemicals messing with your mind.
Right.
Right. So it's got that creepy factor of this could happen.
Right.
And then, but then they kind of,
Right. So
Stumble.
we've talked about what we love about horror movies. We've talked about horror movies we love just for being fun, but horror movies that we love because they did scare us. So do we have a criteria for what's got to be in a horror movie for you to be like, yep, that's in my wheelhouse?
it depends on the kind of horror movie it is. Right.
Right. Sure.
If it's the super cheesy, we're leaning into the fact that we don't know what we're doing and we're just trying to have fun.
Right.
It's got to have that overly self-aware, the complete non sequitur statements. Like, this has nothing to do with any of this. Don't say it.
Greasy Strangler. You're exactly talking about Greasy Strangler. Thank you. Welcome to the fold.
Oh, we're talking about Greasy Strangler again.
Free drinks. Free drinks.
There are no free drinks.
Free drinks.
I'm thinking more like Thanksgiving.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was a teenage wereskunk.
Yes. Yep.
You know, things like that where it's just has nothing to do with anything. It's totally
It's satire,
anachronistic.
Yeah.
And just really crazy, but you could tell they had so much fun making
Right.
this. You got to have that, right?
Sure.
If it's on the more serious side, it's got to have something new and different. Or at least if not new, because cannibals aren't new, zombies aren't new, but if it's got a different approach. Henry Rollins was in this great movie, The Dead Don't Die.
Okay. I've
No,
heard of it.
not The Dead Don't Die.
Nope.
Sorry.
Correct title. He never died.
He didn't die.
He
The
didn't
Dead
die.
Don't Die was the Jim Jarmusch
Right.
zombie film with Bill Murray and Kylo Ren and Tilda Swinton and stuff like
Right. Right.
that, which we talked about on episode 3.
A prior episode.
But He Didn't Die is one that Henry Rollins was in. Some of the stuff in there, most of the stuff in there is tropes and things that have been done,
Sure.
you know, to death or not death.
Right.
But it was a completely different approach to it that was just like, all right, this hits. So you're not relying on just jump scares. So it's got to be an inventive way and filmed in a more cinematic way.
Right.
You know, I think, again, Hollywood cookie cutter horror films aren't done cinematically. They're done just to get in and out.
Well, and the reason why they exist is because they're cheap to make, but they can make a ton of money.
Yeah.
And so that's why they stick to that. They're not built to give the director a huge playground to advance the art form.
Yeah, no.
Typically.
And then the last thing is you have to stick the landing.
Yeah. Yeah.
You have to stick the landing. You can't have a great build up to everything and then just have that like Hollywood end.
Right.
You gotta leave me when the credits start rolling. You gotta leave me going, all right.
Right. Not like you just got tired and it ended.
Or it's just like, okay, yeah, well,
Right.
here we go. You know,
I
and then the
agree.
hand pops up from the end. You know,
Like Carrie.
Yeah.
Carrie's fantastic. We're not trashing on Carrie. I didn't think it was necessary,
Right.
but it's great. Right? Like it wasn't necessary. I wasn't expecting it, which was the point. But it was great. It was great, but it wasn't necessary.
What are yours?
So I will say, so the criteria in finding being scared a little bit as fun, I am looking for fun. So right now with the gialli, the cheesy stuff we've been talking about, I want to have a fun time because they had a fun time. Very rarely am I thinking to myself, I want to be scared just for scared's sake. I'm going to watch something I haven't seen before that's scary. I want to have some fun. And I want to see some love and reverence for the art form.
Right.
That to me, I call it discipline, where you don't just say, that's enough, right? Like, no, I didn't figure it out. Basket case. There are times where they needed to have Belial not be where you think he's going to be. It's the opposite of a jump scare, right? You think he's in the basket. You think he's in the basket. Oh, no, he's not. Okay. They made sure to include a scene where the door is open. And so when you watch it the second time, you're like, oh, he
That's-
totally could have gotten out. This isn't bullshit that oh, we had fun with you, we teased you with a non-event. No, like literally, he had the opportunity to go hide. I've watched it 100 times now, and I'm like, they took care of that. So I consider that some discipline to saying, no, we got to make it work.
Which, side note, that's why I hate a lot of murder mystery movies, is because when you get the monologue reveal at the end,
right,
you're then clued in on things that was purposely hidden from the audience,
right,
so you couldn't figure it out.
Right.
I like the movies where you could figure it out you paid enough attention to the clues.
Right.
But the ones that are lazy are the ones that are just like, you didn't see any of this. We didn't even hint that any of this could be.
Right.
We just did it at the end just to finish it.
Okay, so I know it's beloved, but that was my first impression the first time I saw Scream, that it was the mom character. Because the mom was not in the movie more than 10 seconds at the very beginning.
Okay, I'm confusing Scream and Scream 2.
Now, I get it. Scream was a referential joke of a movie.
Right.
And so knowing horror and knowing all of your horror movies, the fact that the killer was the mom, you're like, okay, haha. But the first time I saw it, it was like, bullshit. No. Because the whole movie, you're trying to look at the clues that they present to you. Does your deductive reasoning point you to the right person as the killer? And there is nothing pointing to the sister from Roseanne. There's nothing pointing to that. It's just your knowledge of the history of Jason. Could that even be a possibility? I was a little ticked, but it's a joke. And so much love for Scream. Scream has done wonderful things for the genre.
It's been a very long time since I've seen Scream. I don't remember the mom being the...
She was the killer. She was the killer.
I remember the kitchen scene where they're like, okay, I do it, and then you do this. And then after that, I just kind of tuned it out.
And it keeps going. So my criteria is I want to have fun. I am a big fan of the ow moment, right? Hardcore Henry is nothing but ow! They just bent that guy's fingers backwards or broke his arm in half or something happens where you're like, ow! I love that. And so if a movie has a good number of those, it's the equivalent of a laugh out loud. Just that punch came. Like, yes! So it elevates above, that was fine. It elevates above that. So I'm looking for a little bit of that. So it has fun, is well made or constructed with some knowledge and some reverence. And then on top of all that, the hot fudge topping is gets to be in there. Now I get to be a little loosey-goosey here. I guess one of my favorite movies ever is Gremlins. But do we consider movies like Gremlins a horror movie? Technically it is.
It's a Christmas horror movie.
It's a Christmas horror movie. So there's certain movies where, okay, Beetlejuice, do we consider that a horror movie? Is that a horror comedy?
I guess technically it's a horror comedy, but I don't really see it as horror.
Right. You wouldn't put it on the horror shelf at the Blockbuster, right? And you wouldn't put Gremlins on the horror shelf. You'd put Critters, but not Gremlins, right?
I would put Gremlins on the horror shelf.
Okay, not the family. I wouldn't call it a family. They got in big trouble for the PG-13.
Right. I would do it because ultimately it's little monsters, attacking,
and it's terrible.
So
terrifying.
Right, terrifying. Yeah. So I would put it in the horror.
All right. Okay.
It would look very strange right next to Saw, but
Right. And I think
it fits that.
The point of this episode is giving our wonderful viewers kind of an idea of, okay, this is what we're looking for in a horror movie. These are what we consider some of our best.
Yeah.
How do we define what a horror movie is? So looking at some of the things you said, I just last night watched Pieces. I just got Pieces. I watched the original Spanish, which was dubbed. But it's a Spanish director.
The original Spanish.
It says watch the original Spanish, but it's filmed in English. Anyway, the original uncensored director's cut presented in Spanish. So anyway, to your point, there's the discipline, right? It's fun. It's not scary. There's no scariness, but they stuck the landing. There have been several other movies I've watched where fair bit of nudity, fair bit of violence, fair bit of suspense, but then I was just waiting for it to end, and it ended, and I haven't talked about those movies ever since. But this one, a lot of nudity, a lot of really creative gore. The story is shit. The amount of... There are a couple times where it's like, That's not how any of this works. But I was able to get over it because they stuck the ending. The ending happened, and I was like, yes! What a wonderful ending. Did not see it coming. It just, there it was. It was fantastic. So that's another strong recommendation. Now I'm going to add in a not fair. Not fair. This is not a typical criteria for forever, right? And I like criteria being for forever. But right now, I am currently seeking movies that are not mainstream or are not well-known or not talked about. I've never seen anybody ever talk about pieces online. And I'm only noticing now. It took a long time of exposure to finally go see Basket Case. I only saw Basket Case about 2 years ago because of the number of people that finally mentioned it. And I know Cannibal Holocaust is huge. It's not unknown, right? But Eaten Alive and Man from High River, some of those aren't well known. So right now, I would love to discover, like it's not like people beg me to watch it 100 times and I finally watched it. I kind of like this level of, I got to tell you about it.
Are you looking at a time frame that it was made, or just in?
No. So like I'm going nuts right now with the Gialli, the 70s, 80s stuff, but like street trash, right? Like I love the fact that you haven't seen street trash. And I can say, Joshua, you have to see street trash. Street trash is really, really awesome, and it's streaming for free right now. You won't regret it. For example, the Autopsy of Jane Doe. If you hadn't seen that, I'm gonna be like, you don't sleep on this one. This one's pretty good. You recommended Midnight Mass, right? Which was a series. It was a series, but it was exactly what I was looking for, as far as kind of a new, fresh take on a familiar zone, right? I don't want to say anything about it. No. It's fantastic. It's a set number of episodes, no fat. It's just the perfect amount of storytelling.
It does go through that like regular Netflix series where the first 3-4 episodes it takes a little bit, but that's just because they spend that time to build the world, and then boom, they hit you with,
and then you don't want it to end.
The first few episodes you're going up that roller coaster, and then boom, you're down and doing loop-de-loops and everything else. Yeah.
So I love the fact that you recommended that. That wasn't something that I had been following and watching, waiting for Entertainment Weekly's exclusive pictures from the set, and following into the hype. I like this whole discovery phase. But that's not for forever. I think at some point we'll know all the movies. There will stop to be any new movies.
I would say check out He Didn't Die.
Okay.
Henry Rollins. It's a small independent film.
Right.
Right. It's not I don't think it would ever. I'd be surprised if it ever hit theaters.
Right.
Type of thing.
We just watched this compilation Blu-ray of 50s trailers, and it was not 1950s, but the mid-century and on, so 60s to 80s. I'd never heard of any of these movies, and it was curated. Somebody, the AGFA, sat down and said, this one, followed by this one, let's not include that one, we got to include this one. And it was amazing. And in watching all those trailers, it was like, all right, now these are ones we got to go indulge in and laugh at or really get to go see. And then prior to that, I watched there's an existing list called the Video Nasties. You can look it up online. And these were movies that were specifically banned in Britain. They were banned. Like you would get arrested if you were a video proprietor and you were caught renting them out. I don't think if you were driving home from the rental store and got pulled over and you had Cannibal Holocaust in your front seat, you would get a ticket. I don't think so, but it was like the fear of arrest to prevent the distribution of it. Anyway, I got a DVD set of just all the Video Nasties trailers, and that was just fantastic. There's a lot of stuff I'd never heard of, stuff I had heard of. And so I love this discovery phase. It's very exciting to me right now. Kind of being exposed to new things and then trying it out.
There are two movies that I want you to watch.
Okay.
Okay. One is it's the same movie.
Okay.
But it was remade. All right. And it's called Let the Right One In.
I've heard of that one. That's the vampire one, right?
It's
a kid.
There's I think it's a French version, and then it was remade. Is an English version. Is it French or Swedish. Oh, I'm sorry. It's Swedish.
Okay.
And then there's an English version. It's not quite shot-by-shot remake like Psycho
Right.
but check both of those out.
Okay.
I want them to be able to talk about that on a future one, because that's something else. Like, let's talk about remakes or reboots or things like that. And I think that sets the stage of being done well. Okay, we could debate whether it needed to be done, but I think it was done.
So, not to ding the future podcast again, but yes, I think one of the discussions we've talked about having is horror movies do a lot of remakes. And some, I think, in my experience, were fantastic. Like, wow, that was a really fresh take on an existing IP. Here's a retelling of the story or a fleshing out of a story. Then there's been a couple missteps and why bothers and you just did it for the cash grab. So we think we have a whole conversation about remakes.
But we should probably bring this halftime to a close.
Yep, let's wrap it up.
We're not going to stick this line.
Maybe not. You never know. It's like chopping off the head and a boob pops out. I tell you, watch the movie pieces. Okay, how about this? We give each other homework, right?
Well, I gave you homework.
You gave me homework.
Of He Didn't Die.
Right. So I want to give our audience, I call it homework, but we've got a comment section. Make sure to like and subscribe and to hit the bell so you can hear everything. But we got comments on, we got a comment area on Facebook, on Reddit, our YouTube video down below. Tell me about a movie. And don't worry if you think I've seen it or already mentioned it, but if there's a movie that you love telling people that they got to check out,
Yeah.
do that. I want to see that in the comments section. Tell me a movie that I got to see. And we'll give it a shot and let you know. And we'll thank you on screen and say it. But I'm telling you, watch Pieces if you've never watched Pieces. And I'm recommending this, A, because I love it. It's a ton of nudity. The violence is fantastic. The story is awful. But I have not seen this pop up a lot in recommendations. So I'm under the false sense of security that I'm introducing something new to our viewers. You may have been talking about Pieces for weeks and I missed it, but that's my recommendation for today. And then obviously, Basket Case, Greasy Strangler, Blair Witch, The Witch, you should have already watched those. That should be a foregone conclusion. You're not going to survive watching this podcast if you've never seen Basket Case. I'm just going to put that out there.
But it's okay if you haven't seen Greasy Strangler.
This is bullshit.
Yes, it is.
Until next time.
Until next time, stay greasy. No, all right. I got a bloodier one. What's a good?
We're keeping all this in.
Okay. Really? No, we got just a little bit.
No.
Yeah, it's got to be trimmed a little bit. I was
trying to have to hack it.
Slash that like and subscribe button and join us in the comment section below.